Alright, hello everybody. Welcome to, this is now session 15 of this podcast going through, I say going through the Bible. In truth, we're going through the New Testament first at least. And right now, we're in the book of Matthew, starting things off with the four Gospels. We are now at the Sermon on the Mount. We kind of, I think we finished talking about the Beatitudes last week. And so that means this week, we'll be going over the passages about Jesus being the salt, not about Jesus being, but about us being the salt and the light, which are two analogies, I guess, that I've always found pretty fascinating to think about. If you are wondering why I might be sounding a little bit groggy today, or if I'm kind of all over the place, well, I'm always all over the place, but especially so today, that would be because I am kind of running on fumes, I guess you could say, a little bit sleep deprived. The story time with Malachi. What about we say that? Last week, this weekend, I spent some time on at a conference, a retreat of sorts at a Bible college in Tennessee. So that's Johnson University in Knoxville. The conference is called Pursue 2. I went to the first Pursue earlier this year, but it's a conference for high schoolers who are specifically interested in going into ministry. And yeah, it was a blast. Had a great time. I actually had the opportunity to give to give a message. There was like a panel of judges, I guess you could say, and get back their feedback, as well as some other students. And I had the opportunity to hear a lot of other students speak, which was something I don't know if I was exactly looking forward to that. Not that I wasn't looking forward to that, but I didn't think that would be the highlight of the week, but it really was, to be honest. Was hearing everybody give their messages, and just their passion and skill was pretty cool to see. And then talk to everybody afterwards. But then last night, unfortunately, I missed my connection. I flew down there, and so I was flying back, missed my connection. I was forced to spend the night in the airport, and so that is why I might be a little sleepy, because to be honest, I have not had as much sleep as I probably should have the past 3 or 4 days. Luckily, I was able to relax a little bit before we went live. I got back in sometime around 3 or 4-ish. So, had a couple hours to relax in my own bed for a little bit. But, let us see. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump right into this thing. We are starting with verses 13 through 16 from chapter 5 of the book of Matthew. That was the other thing I had wanted to say. I almost forgot. I didn't really have enough time to make and research a slide before going live, because I had been taking a nap. So because of that, this is pretty much all we've got for the day. This was the only thing I had prepared beforehand, was these verses 13 through 16. So we'll leave it just these 4 verses. They're 4 really, really good verses, though, so I think we'll still have quite a bit to talk about, but might be a shorter session than normal, perhaps. Alright, verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Sorry, I had to take a swig there. That is the other thing, is that I definitely did not have enough water yesterday, especially in the airport, and so my voice might be a little shot. But enough complaining. Let's jump into this verse. I love these 3-4 verses. You are the salt of the earth. Why are we the... Actually, no. Let's begin first by looking at kind of the context here. Jesus just finished talking about the Beatitudes, and the last one or two we're talking about how we are blessed. I really want to say blessed, but I can never, choose between the two. Anyways, we are blessed if we are persecuted or go through trials or ridicules because of our faith in Jesus, right? And so then all of those Beatitudes were ways in which Jesus, the followers of God that Jesus is looking for, the ways that those people will be different from the normal world. We talked about that the whole way through. All of those, every single Beatitude, except maybe one or two, are very counterculture. And perhaps even counterintuitive at first glance, right? So, this section here is kind of expanding on that idea, like really bringing that idea to the forefront instead of kind of leaving it in the background. Because he says, you are the salt of the earth. Now, what does salt do? What is the significance of salt? Why is that what Jesus compares us to? We can start with kind of the more basic ideas. Salt is, in cooking, that's where we encounter it the most in our daily lives these days. Salt is kind of vital. Almost every single dish will have some amount of salt because it just acts really, really well as a way to accent and enhance other flavors. It is also really useful in the way that it works with other ingredients. You know, what does salt do? I just said it enhances the flavors around it. It adds that bright flavor, that flair, if you will. So that's kind of the basic meaning, but we have to understand the context that this was Jesus was talking in, and this is the day and era that he was in. Salt was extremely valuable. Salt, a lot of people may not know this. This was something I did not know until a few years back, maybe. Salt was used as a currency in quite a few different cultures, and I think in that, the Middle Eastern area, salt is quite difficult to get to. And you might be asking, okay, but why do we really need it? It's not that important, surely. It's just, a little extra flavoring. No, salt is actually... I said it was vital for most modern cooking. It is also vital for human life and most life in general. Without salt, you won't be able to function properly. Like, your body needs salt to work correctly, right? You can be salt deprived. You can also get salt poisoning. But that's a different kind of matter. So because of that, salt was very important. Salt is also kind of hard to get. It's something that you can get a lot of renewably, right? By boiling seawater or by mining rock salt underground, but it's not exactly lying around on the floor. And salt also grew to have a lot of religious significance. I do not remember if much of this religious... Yes, it was. So, you may have know those old practices of, like, throwing salt over your shoulder, right, or something like that to ward off an evil spirit. I'm pretty sure that does date back all the way to this time period. There was something where, unless I'm misremembering, the most honored guest would... I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something else salt had a symbolic importance in the seating arrangements at the table. Like, whoever was... I can't remember exactly what it was. This kind of makes me mad. I'm going to look it up real quick, see if I can find something. Once I see it, I'll remember. Okay, so one thing is that salt was used in a lot of sacrifices in the temple, and so it was kind of a symbol of purity in that matter, which makes absolute sense because salt has another incredible function in that it is really the first preservative, if that makes sense. By salting food, you can make it last significantly longer. Yes, Barbara. Salt water can be used medically as well. Salt is very, very useful, actually. And that the second to last purpose I stated is probably the most underrated one. If you don't have any way to refrigerate your food, especially in the Middle East, there's no way they're getting ice to do that. Salt becomes extremely valuable as the only way to preserve food. And it is also a really good way at purifying like meats and things like that from bacteria, which they didn't really know about bacteria yet, but they understood that salt would clean things. So then, we are the salt of the earth. We are the salt of the earth. And you can look at kind of all those things salt is typically associated with and see how that relates to us, right? We, as disciples of Jesus, should be pure and purifying and cleansing others. We should be preserving, right, God's church and the gospel. We should be this idea that we are valuable and we give this sort of trying to think of the word. I don't want to say flavor. That's not exactly right, but that, like the way salt can brighten up a dish. This is gonna sound really corny, Like, a good Christian should brighten up the room when they enter. You know what I mean? That's a really, really cheesy way of saying it, but that sort of principle. And the interesting thing that Jesus points out is in the rest of that verse. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty again? By the way, some translations translate that differently than taste. A lot of them will say, if the salt should lose its saltiness, which is talking about taste to a degree, but could be talking about its other properties. Looking at my Greek interlinear, it has it as, but if the salt becomes tasteless. So I am assuming that the meaning is relating to taste. It's not talking about salt's other properties so much. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty again? I'm going to be honest. This is one of those verses that I think we talk about, but don't really talk about what it's saying. If a Christian or a group of Christians should lose their taste, should lose their fire, should lose their purpose, should lose their passion, right? Those would be, should lose what makes them different from anything else, right? Salt is very unique. Salt, name something else that is salty in flavor that doesn't have salt in it, and you will probably be stumped for quite a long time. Maybe fish, but I don't even know if fish are really salty in and of themselves. So, salt is very unique, and salt adds something unique to every dish it's in. But if the salt should lose what makes it different, how can it be made salty again? If a Christian or group of Christians should lose their faith, passion, what makes them unique, how can it be made salty? That's a very scary thing to think about. Is that Jesus is kind of saying, you know, if a Christian were to lose their faith, if they were to like walk away and stop being different, how will it become salty again, right? As in, that's kind of a rhetorical question, as in like, it won't, you can't make salt salty again. Like, it is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled on by men. This is a warning more than anything else, which is ironic because it begins in such a different way. This is a transition from, in the previous passage, Jesus was talking about, you're blessed if people persecute you and do all these terrible things to you, and the world is against you because of me, right? You're blessed if that happens because of me. Why? Because, you know, you're the salt of the earth, because you're supposed to be unique and valuable. But if the salt should lose its taste, if the salt should lose what makes it unique and valuable, which is Jesus in their lives, you know, hopping back and forth between Christian and salt here, how can it be made salty again? It's this transition of, you're blessed if you go through persecutions and trials for me. But there's also another path, and that path is where you walk away in those persecutions and trials. There's this path where you stop being all of those things that are blessed. You stop being a peacemaker. You stop being lowly in spirit. You stop being trying to think of what some of the other ones were. Gentle in heart. You stop being all of those things, and instead, you're no longer good for anything. This is what I would say about this, though. Because I think some of us will read this verse and say, but wait a second, I can literally think of people who have been in the church, right? Who have been doing those things, who have been making a difference, who then fell off and stepped away, who lost what made them special, who lost their saltiness, right? And then were returned to the faith at a later time, right? What I would say about that is, brings to mind that really, really interesting passage. I think it is in Matthew, or it might be Mark, where the disciples are asking Jesus, because he says it's harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through a needle's eye. And they ask him, then who can make it to heaven? And he says, shoot, I don't want to butcher this. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but something along the lines of, with man alone, it is not possible, but with God, anything is possible. So I think that's kind of what... Something to remember here, right? He says, if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty again? And there's sort of this undertext of like, unless God makes it salty again, because with God, nothing's impossible. God can make the tasteless salty again. That feels like a line of a song, but it doesn't actually work at all. But anyways, the other interesting thing there is this sort of... When is this being thrown out and trampled on by men? What exactly is that talking about? When does that happen? Because I kind of see three main ways you could read that. The first would be sort of in a more... looking at things from a more close perspective and like, I wouldn't say more realistic, but talking about how the church should handle situations like this, which obviously the church hasn't been born yet, but the first reading would be that if somebody isn't adding to the body of believers anymore, if they're not being salt, but instead just being dirt or whatever, then they need to be thrown out, right? That would be the first reading. I don't think that's what he's talking about at all, because up until this point, as I said, A, the church doesn't exist, and B, he hasn't mentioned it at all. So then the second reading would be that he's talking about the last day, right, and judgment on the last day, right, that then God will say, or Jesus will say, "Depart from me, I never knew you," and those people will be cast into the fire with the sinners. And that's the second reading. The third would be that this is something that happens kind of immediately. That if the salt loses its taste and steps away from God, then it will be thrown out. As in that, okay, maybe there isn't a verse that talks about this, but I feel like, okay, there's a verse that says the opposite, where if we come close to God, he will come close to us, or something like that. Yes? And I think there is kind of, I don't know how to say this, good reason to believe that the opposite is also sort of true. That if we will run from God, not that he's going to run from us, but like, he may take his presence away from us and his power away from us. You just have to go look at Saul, King Saul, right? Really, really good example of this in action, of someone who was, like, if you want to describe anybody as Salt was Saul, right? Which actually, by the way, is kind of ironic because I think salt in Latin is pronounced like soul or something like that. But anyways, Saul was, extremely unique. He was extremely humble. He was extremely passionate. He was, very valuable. He really stood out in a crowd of people, and people would look at Saul and say, there's, a true follower of God, And so it's this, Saul's story really is this verse in action almost, in that Saul loses his taste. Saul suddenly, halfway through his story, he stops acting different from everybody else. He starts to take prisoners of war like all the other kings. He starts to take, keep the animals and not listen to God. He starts to, try to do the sacrifices on his own. He starts to, be worried about his own line and his own power rather than the Lord's. And he starts to become prideful. And so as all that happens, Saul is quite violently thrown out. Right. The Spirit of the Lord left Saul, right? And so I actually think that may be the interpretation I think is the most correct, in that, if you walk away from God, he will take his presence from you. Or at least you'll be walking away from his presence. And so then, when those trials and things happen now, there's this two options of, do you go back to God or do you not? Saul is an example of not, right? He gets trampled on, and instead of returning to God, he just gets more and more angry and more desperate. All right. Verse 14 through 16. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Okay. I do want to read the Greek version as well. This is kind of like me rough reading it, because I do find the way the HCSB translated verses 14 through 16, I'll just say unusual, not the same way a lot of other verses translate them. Just slightly different in some spots. So I do want to see what this has it translated as. Let's see. You are the light of the world. A city lying on a mountain is not able to be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and place it under the grain bucket, but upon the lampstand, and it shines for all the ones in the house. Thus let shine the light of you before men, so that they may see your good works and may glorify the Father of you in the heavens. Ooh, okay, did you spot a difference there right at the end? And I really, really like that difference. Okay, maybe this is me trying to apply English grammar conventions to this Greek text where it shouldn't be, but that I did take a Koine Greek course, and I don't feel like Greek grammar was that different from English in this sense, unless this Greek interlinear is translating it more incorrectly than the HCSB, which I kind of find unlikely, that ending there, may glorify the Father of you in the heavens. As in, I don't think the direct object, is that the right word? The direct object of in the heavens, I don't think what in the heavens is talking about is the Father. I think it's talking about the people who are going to be giving glory, right? That they may give glory, that they may glorify the Father of you in the heavens. Yeah, I mean that's undeniable, because heavens. Yeah, and so, okay, we are gonna have to talk about that. Do we want to put a pin in it and come back? Now, let's just talk about it now. So, what that's saying, I really like that verse, by the way. I really like that. Okay, so, in the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. I always assumed that it was saying, and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. I always assumed that's what it was saying. What it's actually saying is, and give glory to your Father, and in heaven give glory to your Father, right? That would be the most clear way for us to say it in English. That they're, man, I just really like that. I really like that, because I think it wraps up the meaning of that verse so much better. Is that, by letting your light shine before men, it's so that they may see your good works and give glory to God in heaven. Like, when they get in heaven, maybe in some part because you let your light shine before them and because they saw your good works. But even if it's not because of you that they're there, it's still, this idea that in heaven, they'll be like glorifying God because of the good that he did in and through our lives. That is such an awesome image. Somebody please remind me of this in like a year and a half when I need to give another sermon someday, because I feel like I'm going to forget about it, because it's such a small detail, but it means so much. I think that, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It may not really be like a huge difference technically, but it just feels so different that, like, you're letting your light shine so that they may see your good works and in heaven give glory to your Father. Like, one day, when you go to heaven, you'll see all these people and they'll be giving glory to God because in some way, in some sense, that's the structure of the sentence, because in some sense you let your light shine in the good works that you did, and they'll be praising God for that. That is awesome. Just the best. That's so great. It's so much better. I don't know why I never thought that it was supposed to be read that way. Maybe I'm just reading way too much into the fine differences between in heaven and in the heavens, but that seems like that's a notable enough difference. Like, that's not saying the same thing, right? Good works and may glorify the Father of you in the heavens. Yeah, no. Now that can it still be read the other way? Let me think about this. I don't think so. I feel like now looking at it, I think all along it was the other way, where, like, even just rereading it normally now, it makes more sense that the in heaven is talking about them giving glory, not about God. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Give glory to your Father in heaven. Because Father in heaven is a noteworthy thing to say as well, because it specifies that we're not talking about like our normal fathers. We're talking about God, like our heavenly Father. That is important. I don't know. We're going to come back to verse 16. We'll finish this session talking about verses 14 and 15, and we'll come back to verse 16 after I have more time to research. I don't think really... Yeah, I had never looked at it the way I'm proposing, where it's talking about where the people in heaven are the men, not the Father. I mean, the Father is also in heaven, obviously. But I think either way, like, that is true. Like, I think you just have to look at the Revelation accounts and stuff to see that, like, it is true either way. Like, it doesn't really matter. Because, like, they will be giving glory to God in heaven. Like, that is what's going to be happening. But I guess, I don't know. It is a difference in... there is a difference. So I do want to come back to that after I have more time to research and see, like, if anybody else has ever thought that it should be interpreted the way I am, or if that's just something that I came up with. And I'll have to look at some other translations and stuff. So let's go back to verses 14 and 15, shall we? You are the light of the world. If salt is a somewhat tricky image for us, then light is like the most obvious parallel ever. Light is, I literally wrote, I didn't finish it, but like a 10 or 12 day devotion, like section devotion on light and how Jesus is the light and we are also the light reflecting him. Because there are just so many object lessons you can pull from that. We obviously aren't going to talk about all of them here because that's not really what the focus of this verse is on. But, yeah, there's like the parallels between light and Jesus, and then between, you know, how that then trickles down to us becoming light as well. It's just brilliant, you know. I mean, nice pun there. You are the light of the world. What does light do? Kind of the basic meaning. Light inspires people, right? Light is beautiful in that it shows us the world around us, and it is beautiful in and of itself. Light allows us to get things done, right? And allows us to do things. It is necessary for many of the functions of our life and the way the world runs. The world will not run without light. Light is warmth, right? Light is like energy, right? And light shows you what is or isn't real, if that makes sense. Like what is or is not. And I think that's the primary thing Jesus is talking about here, is that we are the light of the world and that we should be shining in such a way that other people can't help but look at us, and by looking at us, see more clearly. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. If you've read this passage before, you may have always scratched your head at that transition. It is a little bit jarring, right? He goes from You are the light of the world, and you expect him to say something similar like, and if the light should not be lit, or something like that, the same way that it was with the saltiness. Instead, though, he suddenly, seemingly, transitions to a city on a hill. Except that that's not all that different. The city on a hill is basically a second analogy, kind of meaning the same thing, sort of. And they are closely connected. Like, a city on a hill, what exactly is that saying? The Jewish people would build almost all of their cities on top of hills. Why is that? Number one, because it is better defensively, like if you're attacked. Number two, because it protects you from flooding and from the wind. And number three, because it allows people to see the city. It allows you from on top of the city to see other people. So it's a city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. Someone who is following God, who is producing fruit, who is living life to the fullest, right? Who is on the mountaintop, that can't be hidden. You can't hide that fact, right? That's what he's saying. And no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Right. Now this is talking about our, essentially sort of our duty as Christians and our purpose, right? God is the one who is lighting the lamp, right? Jesus. He is the one who is lighting the lamp, right? When we hear his truth and accept that truth, we are lit and become lights ourselves, right? We become like a lamp. No one puts a lamp under a bat. The point of a lamp is not for it to be hidden and protected. The point of a lamp is for it to be raised up for everyone to see, so that it gives light for all who are in the house. If you may have noticed, there's that kind of last part is really interesting. The light serves others in that itself. Right, did you catch that? But rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. No one's attention is fixated on the light, right? The light deflects attention from itself, but rather gives light to the rest of the house. So the light is a selfless servant. Just kind of a small detail. In the same way, let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. We can talk about the majority of this passage, in that it is, as you were saying, Barbara, we are supposed to be, as Christians, we will be different from other people, right? That is a, inevitability. Okay? That, almost literally is what it means to be a Christian. That's what it means to be holy, right? To be set apart, to be God's chosen people. That's the way the Israelites were supposed to be. That's the way us Christians are supposed to be. And so then we are supposed to, rather than bring attention to ourselves, we are supposed to instead deflect and shine the light on other things that are more important. Right. There are a lot of other really cool ways light and our faith are connected. Most of them we will talk about in the Gospel of John. John is the one who brings this parallel up the most. So sadly, we will kind of have to wait until then. But there is one other kind of we can talk about is that have you ever sat in a dark area? You will find that your eyes are automatically attracted to whatever, like the closest light source. You can actually, like, genuinely, I was sitting out, somebody had kind of raised this interesting point, and I was like, I'm going to put this to the test. And so I sat outside, I was around a campfire, and I tried to look everywhere else but the fire, and every single time my eyes would naturally, like, I would do it for a little bit, but then the moment I stopped thinking about it, I would find that I was staring right at the center of the fire again. It is a very, very strong human tendency to look towards the light. And so then you can kind of see what I'm getting at is, if we're letting our light shine, other people should be attracted to that, should be looking towards that. And I think that's one of the things Jesus is saying here. Let your light shine before men, so that there's not like so that maybe they will, you know. Actually, that's interesting. So that they, what is the... Interesting. So actually, no. That's actually a good point, is that Jesus doesn't give you confirmation of what will or will not happen if you let your light shine. It doesn't say, let your light shine before men so that they will see your good works, right? Like, if you do enough light shining, people will be saved. That is not what he says. You could be the brightest lamp and still maybe no one would necessarily be impacted by your works. So it's this, but it's still worth the shot, right? In that this is the most you can possibly do to try to bring somebody to Jesus. And so you are going to do that and take that chance, right? But there's not a guarantee that they will accept, that's up to them, free will. I think that'll probably do it for us today, to be honest. I feel like this was slightly a weirder live. We were jumping around a little bit, and I do want to talk about verse 16 more. It's hard not knowing exactly how to read the end of that verse, because the English, like the language loving side of me, really, really, really wants to translate that in the sense that, they will be giving glory in heaven to your Father, right? However, tradition, and all translations I've ever heard of, suggests to me that it's not supposed to be that way, and it's give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Which is an important clarification, because, I think that's kind of a phrase Jesus uses a lot, right? Is your Father who is in heaven. Isn't that even how the Lord's Prayer begins? Isn't it? Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Something. So, yeah, I need to research that one. This is where it gets tricky with the Bible sometimes, is that because it's translated and there's a multilingual, that doesn't sound right, I don't know why. A multilingual, I don't know, that still sounds wrong. Anyways, multilingual barrier, right? But because it's being Greek, which is then translated into Latin, which is then translated into English, even if you try to go more directly, you're still going, like old Greek that we may not know exactly how to translate, and so that's the hard thing with doing this sort of close reading for the Bible, is that you can't always rely on the exact word placement in order, because it changes translation to translation. But I still do like to try to, look at the clues that were being given. A good one was that word may, right? So that they may see your good works. That's an important distinction from will. We've had other ones in previous chapters that were really useful. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this session at least. Sorry, I will see you all in the next one. I should be going live again next Monday. I don't know why I wouldn't be. So we will finish verse 16 then and start the next section. Until then, God bless.